Cool. Thanks.
All right. Welcome into the Peaceful Leaders Club webinar recording. My name is Luke Wiesner, Director of Training and Coaching, and I'm here with founder of Pollack Peacebuilding Systems and the Peaceful Leaders Club, Dr. Jeremy Pollack. Welcome, Jeremy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for coming, having me, Luke, in the webinar, and thanks for coming, Michelle. I'm happy to see you again.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation, and joining us also is Michelle Forney, who will, I believe, it has been in the human resource professional for and leader for, I think, over 20 years, if I was reading your experience correctly. And you're currently serving as the senior manager for employee relations at the multi-billion-dollar financial tech company, is labeled as one of the top places to work in the US, Robinhood, to talk to us today about creating a thriving workplace culture that promotes peace and productivity. It's so nice to have you joining us, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. And thank you, Jeremy, for the opportunity. Great to see you again, Jeremy, as well. It was wonderful having you with my team last week here in Menlo Park. So excited to be here.
Great. And I'm sure there's a lot of really good stuff that I left out of how I introduced you, Michelle. So I'd love to maybe have you kind of catch us up on a little bit more of your background to help our listeners understand a little bit more about you and what you do. So maybe could you start by just kind of filling us in on your bio, maybe talk a little bit about your career journey and what you're doing these days?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So yeah, you were right on the years. I like to think that I started in HR when I was, 3, but that's not really the case. So yeah, I have been in HR now for 27 years, most of it in the leadership role, about 20 years as an HR manager or HR leader. And I really started when I was in college. I fell into it in a small candle manufacturing company, and they believed in, I guess, what I was doing for them, and gave me the opportunity to build their, back then, what we called personnel department. So I've been through quite an evolution with HR in my time, from personnel to human resources to now what we call, shared service center of excellence, the way that HR is viewed. But 27 years, I've worked in different industries: manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, financial services, retail, and now fintech. So seeing all kinds of different industries and the way that leadership handles training and development of their people. So been through quite a bit, but mainly as a leader, most of my time has been in employee relations. So a little bit about what we do in ER, what we call that as a acronym. At Robinhood specifically, our role in my team is to ensure that leaders and employees are heard. We provide guidance and thoughtful response at all times. And our mission here is to actually cultivate and preserve an environment of trust and enabling what we call our Robinhoodies to thrive. So our role is really to act out in our model, and not to tell our managers no. Like, that's really where you'll see in a lot of employee relations teams and HR, they feel like HR is there to tell them no. And that's really not what we do here. We're not the police. So we like to really make sure that our managers have the tools they need in the workplace, whether it's conversations or just development or training. And then we are also here for the employees that have concerns. So we're here for them to have an outlet where we can help guide them and clear roadblocks.
Michelle, that you touched upon this in your background a little bit. I was just curious, what have you seen in terms of the changes over the last 20 years in HR, from where you started in a personnel department now to where you've got a people operations department that oversees employee relations, sort of recruiting, and all kinds of different departments. What have you seen in terms of the changes in terms of how companies are now interacting with their staff?
Yeah, great question. When I look back in my journey, I think, HR is now finally really evolving to the space of where they're seen as a value add in an organization. I think HR overall has always been an added value, but in the beginning stages, we were so transactional. We were those folks that just cut the payroll checks. We were the folks that people came to when they had an accident, workers' comp, or, just really, really transactional. But now I think organizations are really seeing the value in HR from as they've started, especially evolving into the shared service models and the center of excellence, where they're leaning in on us more to help with the strategic planning and to really focus on the people. And, as you look at the industry now, and we talk about psychological safety, we talk about a good speak up culture. You need a team to really be behind that to help the leaders evolve to that space, because leaders are focused. Let's face it, leaders really, most of their time is focused on building a business, right? We're there to make a profit, or even nonprofits, they're there to build a business. So their role is there to really focus on that, but they should still be focusing on the people. And I think now you're starting to see that more evolve with the way that HR is being brought in and having a seat at the table.
Are they connect? It seems to me like, because there's a connecting of the dots between the bottom line and happy people, right? Because it used to be kind of two separate things. People do their job, be professional, come to work, be an adult, that kind of thing. But we're seeing an uptick in soft skills over the last couple of decades, because it seems like they're starting to connect the dots. Well, hey, if we don't do that now, maybe people's expectations have changed over the last couple of decades, especially as like millennial workforce, their expectations are different in terms of what they're given from their employers. But do you see more leaders, like senior level leaders, connecting those dots, saying, I know that we need to have a satisfied, engaged workforce in order to have a successful, profitable business and a bottom line?
Yeah, absolutely. You're seeing it more now, but now, granted, there still are industries out there where I think that they're struggling in that space, but it's really getting them to see the importance of it. But I think the competition with other organizations that are putting their people first, that are really looking at the importance of creating a safe space for employees and a space where employees can balance their personal life with their work. That's very big right now. We're seeing wellness in the workplace and mindful leadership more. Leaders that are doing that are not, it's not affecting them. In the end, it affects their bottom line, right? Because you have employees that aren't going to speak up. Employees are more productive if they are able to speak up. Employees become more creative when they're happy in the workplace. So I think that we're seeing that trend. And I do think that now that they're starting to see the importance of having HR at the table or employee relations or your HR business partners, and they're aligning with the businesses and showing them what they can do and help strategize, that, we're starting to see that more. And I think that's the positive side of how HR has evolved.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm curious on your thoughts on this, because it seems like a lot of people want to kind of put it. I think it's great that HR is being given more of a seat at the table. And I also have in work with some of my clients, there's this feeling of, well, HR should be doing more, and maybe more responsibility is being placed on HR. So leaders kind of at the department level can say, oh, that's HR's job, not my job. So I'm going to let them take care of that, or refer them over to HR to do that. Do you have any thoughts about kind of like the delineation of the partnership that HR has with the leaders throughout the organization? Yeah,
I think that's a good question. Look, I think that a lot of times there's a misalignment or misunderstanding on really whose roles are what. And you'll see that in any organization. I think that's where HR and it starts at the top, where there's that partnership and understanding who does what. I mean, leaders really should own a decision that's made when it comes to an employee. HR really shouldn't be the person who's telling them what to do. They should be guiding them and giving them the recommendations that work best for them or work best for the organization and the employee. They should always have the employee's interest in mind as well in that, and risk to the organization, right? So HR, we're looking at things from a bigger picture when we're giving recommendations, because we're seeing all the elements that could either expose the organization for risk, and we're supposed to be giving that to the leader. So our role should be really aligning with the leader and helping guide them to the right decision with recommendations. But I think a lot of times there are some things, that belong over in HR. If an employee has a question about benefits, for example, they should probably be referred. But you know what? Leaders also have an obligation to know what resources are available. We all, as leaders, myself, I'm one, I would rather be able to answer my employees' questions and then give them where they could go to find more information. I'd rather be that person that is supportive of my team member to know what's going on with them as well. If I take myself out of my role in HR, that's the kind of leader I would rather be. I want my team members to come to me. I'd rather them ask me questions. They can go to HR, of course, but I would also rather have the answers too when I can. So I think it's our obligation as leaders to really understand what resources are available also for our team members. So to me, it's really a partnership. It helps the company, it helps the employees, and it helps obviously leaders learn as well. So I think it's more of a partnership, but we still do see that. We see a lot of, well, that's not my job, or do I have to make that? I'm not making this decision. It's HR. We still see that, Luke.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I love that you brought up the word partnership, because that's kind of what it feels like it needs to be. And without that, it's kind of like, well, I'm going to defer responsibility. That's something HR is going to handle, and HR's feel, well, that's something the leadership needs to handle. And then no one does it. And the employees are left feeling, well, what about us? Like who's actually pushing some of these things forward?
Yeah.
So how HR gets brought into the table and how that partnership works, I feel like is really important to some of the topics that we'll be touching on today.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and maybe some sort of clarity for employees as to like, what is the protocol? What kinds of things are, HR's realm versus their leader's realm or something. And I like this idea of partnership too, because it's kind of like when you become a leader in some capacity, you ought to be learning from HR, and HR ought to be learning from the leaders, like shared learning in some way, so that everybody understands what each other's doing. And leadership, a lot of times people get promoted to leadership without any training in soft skills, essentially. And they're really good technicians, or really good at what they do, but they don't know how to manage people properly. And that ends up leading to a lot of problems. So the more that they can, sort of be educated from an HR perspective in terms of soft skills and, relating to employees, I think that's probably important.
I agree, Jeremy, 100%. I think we throw leaders into the training and development tools like importance of documenting conversation, or, you've got to have this compliance training, and we throw all these trainings at them, but we don't really take the time to help them with those people skills and how to have a difficult conversations, how to resolve conflict within your team, how to be empathetic. I mean, really, that's, you're seeing more nowadays where employees really want that empathetic leader as well.
Yeah.
Someone they can go to. The times have been really tough. Let's face it. I know we'll probably talk a little bit about that today, but employees are looking for that. They're looking for that safe space, because you're spending most of your life with your employers and employees, you're spending all day, more so than with your family. So they're looking for a place that they can go and know that their leaders are going to be supportive of them. And you're right. HR has a duty, and we should, every single one of us that work in HR, I don't care what your role is, you should be partnering with your businesses that you support and knowing what is going on with them, understanding their goals, their visions, their roadmaps, and really knowing where their drivers are, because you're behind the scenes having the conversations with employees, having conversations with the leaders, and you need to have that information as well. You need to be a partner with your business.
Yeah. Any suggestions for best practices from HR perspective? If you're an employee relations team, how do you assess what's going on in a particular business team at any moment? I mean, are you running some sort of formal assessments? Are you kind of having regular meetings with the leadership? What's the best way to keep up to date on what's going on, so you can head off issues before they kind of spiral out of control?
Right. Good question, Jeremy. And I really think it depends on the size, obviously, of the organization and how things are structured. But, historically, what I've seen that works is, because now in a lot of the organizations that are shared service models, you have an ER partner and an HR business partner and a comp partner and a recruiting partner who may support obviously one line of business. So you've got your groups. I think it's important for those partners to come together and really understand what each other has going on. So frequent meetings. And I know we get into meeting overload, but frequent touch bases, however they can do it. And also just really making sure that the business knows who their partners are. There's usually one HR person in most organizations now who really is at the seat next to the business, and their HR business partners typically now, and they should also be bringing the information back to the partners. There should be that link that's continuous, education and continuous conversations, and spending time in meetings with the people leaders and listening to what's going on with their employees and running data. In employee relations, we use, in the last 4 companies I've been with, we've used database systems where we track all the calls that come in from managers to employees. When I say calls, I mean outreach. People really don't call anymore. It's through some email. It's either email or Slack or whatever the tools are. Yeah. But yeah, so they'll outreach, and we document everything in a case management system. So we could, we could run data and trends to identify, what are we getting a lot of calls on this specific policy? Is it written right? Why are we getting so many? Or wow, we're seeing a lot of complaints come in about unfair practices in under this one leader, and we could really drill down. So, data is important so that we can look for stories, and then we can go back to the business and identify gaps and what can we do better. And then that's when we pull in our diversity and inclusion teams, or like here at Robinhood, we call them our inclusion, equity, and belonging team. And they're one of our most wonderful resources. And they're also in HR people. And, to look at what's going on to help us really identify how can we create a better environment here if we have something that needs to be done. So, data always, data tells a story, right? So yeah. you can't deny data. That's wonderful. That's important.
It probably depends a lot too on how interested senior leadership is in giving you the autonomy, or at least giving the people department the autonomy to make changes if necessary based on the data. I see some companies that collect data and they can't do anything about what they collect. They can't actually put anything into action because some senior leadership is so rigid and they don't want to look at the data, or they don't want to do anything about it because they don't want to rock the boat. And so I think, having companies like Robinhood and like other, sort of forward, more progressive thinking companies that are willing to start making adjustments based on some of the people data they're gathering is so important.
Yeah. You really see it work when you start, looking at data and making recommendations. You can make subtle, small recommendations as well, and start with just, whether you need a unconscious bias training, or diversity and inclusion training, or maybe DISC profiles or leadership 360s done on leaders. There's so many things you can recommend, where so many tools out there that are available to improve environments. And it's worth every minute put into it and every dollar spent.
I've seen this a few times where, and I'm sure you both have as well, where you get the data that you're collecting, and leadership looks at it, and maybe people feel like they don't feel safe to speak up. And we're going to talk about speak up culture kind of throughout this conversation as kind of a thread. But I've seen a lot of leaders kind of receive that data as like, well, it's their responsibility to be the ones to speak up, rather than trying to think about how to create that environment that enables people to speak up, and instead puts out some release or something that says, hey, it's, we want you to speak up. And it's that the willingness or the desire for the leader for people to speak up isn't quite enough to satisfy that safety for people to feel like they can speak up. And it's kind of connecting for me, something that we've kind of went back and forth on before this conversation about being a mindful leader. And I was wondering if maybe this would be a good opportunity if you would be willing to expand on that a little bit, and how that might translate to our conversation so far about how it might help create maybe a little bit more of that safety for folks to be able to speak up within an organization.
Yeah, sure. So, and this is something we actually just built out within our team, as well as a mindful leader training, so that we can just disperse it around kind of, whenever we feel we need to put it out there. But, really, to me, I see mindful leader in 2 ways. I see it as leaders look at themselves and how they center themselves in their work and center themselves in the workplace, how they remain calm versus reactive, looking and focusing on positive intent instead of ill intent, kind of reshaping that mind. To me, it's really also cultivating the ability to be present with your team and open-minded and compassionate, obviously, and empathetic. And then also I see it as how a leader responds to employees that come to them with difficult situations within the workplace and personal life. And now this has really come to light more in the past since this pandemic, right? So where employees are really struggling with either going now to remote work and their kids are distance learning. Now this is kind of over now, but people are now starting to try to get back to normalcy a little bit. And so they're still struggling. People are going through divorces more, and it's still a little, there's still a little noise out there. So really, how is leaders responding to employees in their difficult situations? And if you look at like a lot of the latest, like the Gallup poll that there was one that just came out last year, and 42% of people in the workplace had declining in mental health. So, if you look at that number, that's for most, it's like almost 50%. That's almost half of the workforce. And so now more than ever, I think that leaders need to stop and really think about how they're leading in a mindful way. And we, here we talk about 6 different ways within our team about, leaders need to communicate well and be very transparent as much as possible. Yeah. And to us, that's really critical, as well as, providing support for their team members, talking to employees of how they can support them and having that open dialogue, offering, temporary shift priorities if they need to, like I'll shift your priorities. Let me just temporarily do that for you. And just really helping them through that. Modeling healthy behaviors. Nobody likes to see a manager that says, oh, I worked 7 days a week. There's nothing heroic about that. Your team looks at that and they think, wow, oh my gosh, is this really what's expected of me? I mean, whenever I hear a manager say now, I work 7 days a week, it's like, okay, I'm not impressed, right? So it's just, you should model. If you're taking a day off to go for a walk, tell your team you're doing that, show them it's okay. Being empathetic, we've talked about that. And the other thing is clearing roadblocks for your team members if you need to. That's critical. And then, knowing your company's resources. If you do those things, you're really in that mind space of being mindful to your employees' environment. And that's how we look at that. And we have a little phrase that we like to say, listen, repeat, and direct. And that's if an employee comes to you, listen to them, stop, pause, listen, and really listen, and then repeat what they say, and then direct them where they need to go. Because if they're stressed out about something going on in their life, they are grieving a loss of a family member, or something is they're not able to ground themselves. They're looking to you to help ground their work. And again, work is most of their life. So as a leader, you should really, stop and really think about what your team members are bringing to you and how you're responding to them. And that's something that I think really creates a nice foundation for a mindful leader.
Yeah, I feel like there's a change in the perception of this, but I feel like the old school is kind of leadership. If you're a manager or you're a leader, you have people that work for you, and you have people that work under you. And I feel like that's kind of more changing now to maybe where like the leader is kind of seen as maybe more of like what's feeding the team to be able to do the great work that they're doing, and is more of the support system for the team. Mm-hmm. But you mentioned something that I feel like I want to just kind of like double click on for a second, which is the transparency piece. And I feel like when I talk to leaders about transparency, sometimes I get like this, like, like deer in the headlight looks of there's some concerns about the word transparency sometimes, of how to be transparent, what to be transparent about. Could we kind of dive into that a little bit deeper? Do you have any thoughts on kind of like how a leader might bucket, okay, this is okay to be transparent about, but this might be something that I don't be transparent about for whatever reason, whether it's a employee issue or vision or direction of the company or whatever it might be. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would never want a leader to divulge anything that's, privacy about another team member, or something that they just know that they cannot share. There's still that you can't share, but there's ways to communicate it. And I think, looping in folks to help you as a leader, if you're a leader and you're not sure, can I share this or how can I share this? Looping in your HR team and how to frame something is very, very beneficial. And that's one thing I really admire about a lot of our leaders here where I'm at, is a lot of them do ask, how can I say this? Will you help me with talking points? And I think that's great because they want to be transparent. Now for, I'm kind of a glass door stalker. Okay, it's really bad that I say that. I have a love-hate relationship with social media when it comes to workplace. So, I go in and I look, Luke, and I look at what are people saying about the top employers? What are some of the top things? And I've seen transparent leadership and as a pro, right? And when I think about how are people transparent here where I'm at, our CEO, our founders are transparent with us. They don't hold back. They have frequent all hands meetings every Thursday with our team members. And I think that's important, that leaders are having those all hands, those meetings with their team, so that everyone knows what's going on. And I think that's when I say transparent, it's really making sure people are in the know that need to be in the know, and that they understand where their department and their teams are going. During the pandemic, a lot of employees were like, are we going to have to go back to the office? That was the biggest fear on so many team members' minds across, I think, every company. And I was at the bank before here, and that was the biggest, that just was something that just kept people in upheaval. And, the more transparent we could be about, hey, we're still looking at it right now, we're looking at this date, but that could shift a little longer, as long as we were keeping them in the know. I think that's really what I refer to as transparency.
Yeah. When people don't, even telling people, I don't have that information right now, but I will keep you informed as we go. Even that can help, I feel like, keep people in the loop, so they're not filling in the blanks about why you're maybe withholding information versus maybe they just don't have that information because it's a fluid, ever changing dynamic, which the beginning parts of the pandemic, I think, is a great example to that. And we talked a little bit before this of some companies that really jumped in early and said, we're going to give people stability and hey, we're going to be working remotely for the rest of the year, or we're going to be moving this direction anyway. And then some companies that maybe kept employees stringing along of, well, we're going to reassess every couple of weeks. And that 3 months later, employees never really get their home office set up because they're prepared, didn't go get their office chair or whatever, because they're unsure about the future. So that kind of clarity in it is really important. So thanks for touching on that, because I think that's a really important thing for leaders to be thinking about of kind of how to keep people in the loop and provide clarity for folks.
And I think not answering them is even the worst. If you don't have the answer as a leader, go find it. And if it's something that's important to your employee, don't just direct them to go find it. You should go find it, because more than likely they're talking to their coworkers anyway. And it's something that you probably should just go ahead and talk about with your whole team. It really is, instead of ignoring it.
Yeah, I mean, people want consistency, and they want to be able to predict something about their future so that they can feel secure. And when their leadership, who controls aspects of their lives, at least at work, doesn't have an answer for them about the future, that's a very scary place to be. Right. So, and sometimes it's the truth. They just don't have the answer yet, but at least, I don't know if you have any suggestions as to if we don't have the answer, what would be the next, sort of a plan B, next step, best practice to make sure that our workforce feels secure or feels supported, even in the face of an unpredictable future. I don't know if there's any.
That's always a tough one, right? But I think I think the messaging, I think anytime a leader doesn't have an answer, they've got to figure out a way to answer it, even if it's still kind of, no answer is the worst answer, but, as long as they can at least give something to their employee that they've heard them and they've listened and that they've pulled in this department. So whether even they say, hey, I've pulled in HR and Michelle doesn't have the answer yet, but she's a resource for us and we can follow up with her. At least allow them to know that you're going to follow up, or there's someone else that's going to come back and follow up. And, that I think at least is better than nothing.
Yeah.
What you just said there of resource for us, not resource for you, but this is a resource for us, promoting that kind of, I'm in here with, like, reframing the whole ivory tower type leadership
Right.
to I'm here with you, amongst you. We are going to figure this out together, and here are our resources. That really kind of crystallized that for me. I really appreciate you framing it in that way.
Oh, I didn't even realize I did that, Luke. Thank you.
It's great. I mean, but that language matters to to people, like
Yeah.
even implicitly, even if people don't, explicitly be able to say, oh, they did this, but it makes people feel like we're in it together, or feels like, oh, they don't care. They're over there with their in their closed office, and I'm out here, struggling.
Right.
So that language matters.
And it's
Can
funny
I-
you
can
say
I-
that now too, because so many companies don't even, I'm seeing more where they don't even have offices. They're keeping the managers out on the floor with the employees. And I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, of course, unless you're in a different role that you really need to have a confidential space you can go into. But now that you brought that up, that's really that cultivates a very, we're in this together, and it takes away that ivory tower.
Can I bring up something that I heard, because this almost, it brings up the threshold to this sort of whole topic of mindful leadership, listening, repeating, being there, supporting, etc. I'm wondering if if you see a threshold where at some point a leader has listened enough, or it gets to the point where it starts to feel like there's an individual or maybe a team that just it's either they're never happy, or what they're dealing with is so intense that they're almost unable to get past it. And I feel like at some point I've been listening, I've been trying to empathize, I've been trying to be supportive, but it seems like it's never ending. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I've seen this before, where it's like, well, at what point does it become, we need to stop with the venting, or we need to stop with this, constant problem, and let's get to some solutions here. Let's figure out what we can do, because some people get stuck in a problem. They never want to get out into the solution. So I'm wondering if you have any experience with that, or if you have any, suggestions as to like a particular type of threshold, or when leaders should know, hey, I've done what I can. At this point, we need to sort of transition into a new mode.
Yeah, Jeremy, we just call you now. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, just call someone else.
No, I've seen that a lot. And, there's always something there though, when you just can't get everybody, a team, or maybe it's multiple folks in a department, and you just cannot get them to come with solutions. And they just are really harboring the past, of what may have happened. That's usually when my team will step in and have conversations with, employee relations at a company, or HR would start having dialogue with each team member. And that's where, what I've done in the past 3 organizations I worked for, we'll go in and do what we call climate checks or climate surveys. And we will do anonymous, interviews with each team member. If we've already done that, typically that's the moment when we really are able to find out what is really the root problem here. Is it just communication from a leader? Is it one person on the team that's really creating an environment that's hostile for everybody? Because we see that when we conduct investigations. Or is it pay? Is everyone just miserable with the pay and the bonus structure? Getting in there and really having those one-on-one conversations with each team member is critical. And should never try to figure out who's saying what. And we usually don't share who says what. I mean, that's typically if you're doing a climate survey, but giving kind of just recommendations back to the leadership. But, and I think leaders, so if there's another next level leader, they should be also conducting skip levels with their team members. I think that's important that both levels are communicating and engaging with the team members so that they can, hear from them what's going on, if there's misalignment on goals and objectives as well, not just culture, but is there a misalignment in how things are being communicated? They can usually get ahead of it if they're doing skip levels, whether it's quarterly or twice a year. I think that is really important for every leader to do if they have multiple layers underneath them. I know it's hard to do, but even small coffee breaks with 3 or 4 team members on a Zoom meeting is helpful, giving them 30 minutes just to ask specific questions about, what do you think of our goals? Or what do you think of this? And getting feedback.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
Yeah. People really, I mean, that is really creating an inclusive culture. I mean, people really
absolutely.
feel siloed sometimes. I was just on the phone with a client who works in the financial sector, and during the pandemic, because of the people were out of the office, she essentially only has a relationship at this point with her direct supervisor. She doesn't, if her direct, she said if her direct supervisor left, she doesn't have any loyalty to anybody else at the company because no one has stayed in touch with her, either her skip level or even her colleagues that also report to the same supervisor. They've just been so siloed, and so no one's been putting any effort into keeping each other there. And I felt like, this is a recipe for disaster if they care about keeping people on board, because if one person leaves, everyone else feels cut off from anyone else at the institution. So
yeah.
We
had a team member a few years back in the beginning of the pandemic when a manager left, and we don't even know how this happened, and a team member was shifted under a new manager, but nobody knew who this team member was, and the supervisor never met her, and she showed up on the performance review list during perf time, and she reached out and said, "Oh, I guess she's two stories down from me, and I don't know who she is. I haven't met her." And she'd worked under her for 3 months. Now, we shouldn't say under her, literally, because she was 3 stories up. But she was her employee for 3 months, and she had no idea. That was a miss. That was a real miss on the handoff. And someone was not checking in to see how the team was doing and going another step by asking how the team members were doing that were, with the layers. They missed it. Someone missed it.
There's a process issue there too.
Yeah.
Just a general process. Yeah.
Yeah. It really highlights the value of having a really clear plan during like reorgs and things like that, or transitions. I am curious though, kind of what you're just saying there about, people feeling disconnected, like what Jeremy was saying with his client. I've had an increased theme of people feeling that since workplaces have gone remotely. I know you're working in a fully remote environment right now. Do you have any tips for people who do lead teams to kind of keep the connection, so it's not just them to their individual people, but to keep the team in an atmosphere where they can connect with each other without the direct involvement where the leader has to coordinate and structure all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our team hadn't met one another. It's been a year that, the team has been built, very new team here. And we first finally saw each other in person last week. It was quite incredible to finally see us in 3D. I didn't realize that we all were 3D because, we've been looking on a screen for so long. But we really, but we picked up where we always have been, even though it was so incredible to see one another. You realize the bond that you make when you're really engaged with your team members. And I really think leaders, for me, what's important is, constantly making sure that, I know there's the too many meetings, but you really have to, especially if you're remote, in having those check-ins, weekly meetings, and then one-on-ones. Never miss one-on-ones. I mean, that to me is your most important meeting on the calendar. And I'll tell people when they want to get on my calendar, I'll say, nope, that's my one-on-one with so-and-so. I'm not moving it. It's just, that is an important time. And I think leaders need to realize that one-on-one is not just as important to you, but it is really important to your employee, especially in a remote environment. They are already feeling disconnected because we don't walk into an office anymore. And, they want that time with you, and they want to build that relationship with you. So I think that is really important. And I think a lot of folks should utilize some of the different tools out there, like the DISC profiles, or, Myers-Briggs has been around a long time, to really get to know one another and what working styles are, because we don't see it physically anymore. We're working, remotely. I think it's important to share that and be transparent with one another as a team to build upon, who's an S in the DISC profile, who's a D in the DISC profile, who speaks up, who doesn't, really identifying so that you don't have some dominant folks on your team. And I really think it's up to the leader to make sure that everybody's inclusive, everything's included, and that they should be learning that and knowing who on their team may be hiding, and knowing what brings things out of them. I think that's important. And then you have to get really creative on team building, and you should always be doing team building. There's things you can do that are even free. I mean, you don't even have to spend money. So, really having that environment of that inclusivity environment.
I love the DISC profile. Not being physically in the office, you miss the opportunities to, not even if you're not interacting with a coworker, to just, you feel their emotional energy in the office, and you miss the opportunity to, if you don't have any meetings on the calendar with them, to just, they're walking to the copy machine, and you just feel they're off, and you go check in with them. Or being able to say like, like Luke's been off lately, last couple of days, like maybe I should go attend to him. Or if you are only meeting once a week, you only have like that 30-60 minutes to kind of catch that emotional resonance with folks. So having that kind of clear awareness of how people operate and what people need, and treating people differently, and knowing like, maybe this person needs to meet once or twice a week, and this person I only have to meet with once every other week. To try to meet people where they're at, to kind of catch those moments, because we miss those moments remotely.
We do. And those development conversations too, look, you miss those when you're not in an office where you can just run by and say, have you done this training? Or, hey, I saw you the other day and I listened to a conversation you were having with so-and-so. We don't get to see that anymore. So, if you have to be very intentional about your development conversations with your team member. And I'm not just talking about performance issues. I'm talking their actual self-development that is helping them grow, knowing what their career goals are, and really keeping that also as such a topic of consistent conversation, at least, if not monthly, quarterly.
Michelle, I was looking on Glassdoor, and it looks like, Robinhood has a lot of great reviews, and I think it's somewhere in like the top, sort of 10% of companies. And I also saw that I think in 2021 it was number 27 best places to work. So definitely top 100 best places to work, which is quite an accomplishment out of like the millions of companies there are. Just curious, do you have any tips or sort of high level competencies or areas, or just sort of values that Robinhood holds that you think contributes to that success?
It's funny you say that, because like I said earlier, I'm a Glassdoor stalker, and, I have that love-hate relationship with Glassdoor, but, I'm on it frequently too, just to see kind of what's going on. Cause I think it's important not to stalk, in a bad way. I really want to see, how are people feeling? A lot of times, you do get a lot more folks who are unhappy that will definitely express their concerns, but sometimes that's important as well. I mean, obviously it is important, especially if you can, that there's a root problem there. But I really, in looking, it's funny you say that, because I've noticed that a lot of the top positive, even highlighting statements, nothing about comp or benefits, even in the cons, with a lot of the top companies, and with our company more, it's that the ability to speak up and be innovative. I remember seeing people in the culture are truly amazing, an exhilarating environment, genuinely caring. The benefits are great too. Let's face it, the benefits are good too. I think companies really need to start looking at their benefit plans and really thinking about more of what not just the employees need, but their families need. And usually have a couple, most households have two dual income. Some, and then single parents, obviously they really need some as well, but I think benefits are very, very critical. But I think here, and I agree with all of those things that I see that people are saying, just since I've been here. And I think that one of the number one things is the all hands and the transparency from our leadership from the top down. Our founders are very open with us. They really are, and they include. And when I say include, I mean, they include team members to really be a part of it, in person and whether on Zoom. They're very engaging, and they really make sure that the team members feel like they're there's just, you saw cats everywhere in our building. They really make sure that every team member is a cat's meow. Like they really make sure that they're the top cat of the company. So, and that's coming from our founders. And it starts at the top down. The other thing is our mission. We really work around our mission, and we talk about our mission and our values in every meeting, and everything surrounds that. And so we really have the ability, our team members here really have the ability to thrive and really be seen for what they're skilled for and able to use their skills. And, we have an amazing inclusive equity and belonging team here. And many orgs don't tap into them, and they're there, they're a great partner. I think the other thing is our resource groups. Employees really appreciate the amount of resource groups we have. And then we're intentional in the work we do. There's no, if we're focused on, whatever our goals and objectives are here, we're focused on them. We're not filling our plate just to fill our plate. We're really intentional on what does the company, the customers, what does the employees need today? And what are the top things that we need to get done? And we work through them. We work as a team. And so we're very intentional on the work. There's no busy work here. Everything is important and needed work. So one difference that I've seen coming here than many other organizations.
Yeah. That's huge, because people a lot of times feel like they're spinning their wheels or going through the motions, and they're not getting anything done. They're not contributing to the company or to society in any significant way. So people feeling like they're being included in the entire process, and that process is serving a mission that everybody is bought into and feels good about. That seems like a recipe for success.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone kind of, if you have an idea, bring it. Even our founders say, if you have an idea, we want to hear it. We want to hear from you. So they look at employees are treated like an owner.
So everybody has a voice. Everybody feels like they have some sort of ability to give input, and it'll be heard. That's a huge, Yep.
And the difference that I've seen in some companies that espouse to that and say that everybody has a voice, but then the engagement surveys come back and that's not exactly the case. Right. To me, I feel like the difference is you have to say it, but then you also have to celebrate or have some sort of reinforcement when people do it, and not, criticize people for bad ideas or retaliate against people if they shine light to a problem that maybe leadership doesn't want to actually acknowledge. So I don't know, Michelle, do you see that as kind of like an equal part to this too, is not just having the value, but also kind of what you do after people are brave enough to do that?
Yeah. And, I think a lot of folks think, oh, speak up culture means, oh, you have to have a integrity hotline and that's it. Like to them, they're looking at it as a place for someone to complain. Yeah. They're not shifting their mindset to a speak up culture being positive. They're looking at it as a negative. And, if you don't create that positive space or that psychologically positive space for your team members, you're already in the mindset of everything's negative. So you're not shifting your mindset as a leader. You're just exposing yourself. You're not really opening things up for that speak up culture. I think that's where a lot of companies, and even maybe HR departments that haven't grown and that are still growing, are really focused on, well, we're a complaint department. We have a hotline. Or they can send us an anonymous email. That's not what it's about. Speak up culture is so much more than that.
Yeah.
And then those complaints just get lost somewhere. It's like having a suggestion box, but not actually having anyone read through them or kind of looking through them and not acting upon those. So having some sort of actionable thing with that is helpful, I guess. But the real value of the speak up culture is it allows people to bring up cool ideas that are going to benefit the organization that maybe they wouldn't otherwise do, because when you speak up, you're putting yourself immediately at risk. In any sort of context. And people, as we know, people are more likely to protect their own self-interest typically than the organizations. And so, organizations really have to be proactive in not just saying it, but creating it. And it makes me think, and I don't know, Jeremy, if you've noticed this, but a lot of I've noticed a theme with the people that I've coached or worked with that are struggle with this are often new managers or new directors or new leaders. They're inheriting a team where there hasn't been a speak up culture, or people have been retaliated against, or there's been a lot of conflict. I'm curious, Michelle, if you have any thoughts or suggestions to those leaders that come into a new environment with the intention of shifting that culture, but it's already deeply anchored, that lack of speak up and safety.
Yeah.
Michelle and I we practiced a scenario that was like this.
Oh, did you really?
We did. That's why, Jeremy's on speed dial now. Yeah. So great. It's a great question, Luke. And I think, I always feel bad especially when, there's something that we just haven't fixed or been able to shift into the right direction. A new leader's coming in. And I always want to get with that new leader right away and say, okay, these are some of the things we're working on, and these are some of the things we're seeing, and help them, but not all leaders have someone like an ER department or an HR department that's able to do that. And I hate to do that to them, but that's important. But I think where a lot of leaders make mistakes too, when they come into a new space and there's already even if it's not a turmoil department, even if it's a solid department, they can really ruin it. But by coming in and just, you see them come in guns a-blazing, ready to go, ready to make changes right out of the chute. And I think that's where they stumble on themselves, and they don't come in focused on the people. They come in focused on, oh, I got hired to make all these changes and to come in, and they really should come in and sit back and be clear with the hiring manager, whoever hired them, on, I really want to focus on the people first. I want to get to know them. I need to see what's going, I want to really get in here and see the team and familiarize themselves. They should really familiarize with everybody. Speak to the values. It's not hard to learn what a corporation or a company's values are from the beginning. Speak to the values and lead to them right when you come in from the beginning. And that sets the tone. You're not coming in to change their environment. You're coming in to speak to the company and speak to them and get to know them. I think they need to demonstrate, obviously, a concern for each team member, actively solicit feedback from each team member, and come in with an open mind, check all biases at the door, which every leader should do anyway, but to really make sure that they're not coming in with a bias and not getting a bias from other folks. And also coming in and kind of setting the stage as they're having the conversations with the team members and getting to know them, as team members start to talk about other team members. If there's any negative talk, to spin that to a positive and show them, just show them your ability to change that tone and that language, and let them speak though, but really try to reset that, almost like mediation in a way, right? Jeremy. But, really showing that you value and appreciate their ideas from the beginning. And, we talked about the words we use, so that's critical. And, if you are going to make changes, I think you should really be transparent. That's when you really need to be transparent on changes that you do make, because you need to be clear on the why. If you come in and make changes and you're not including leaders that may report to you, or employees they may report to you that aren't leaders of a team, they're going to check out. They're going to check out, and they're probably going to leave, because they're going to see that you're going to do everything in a silo and that their voice doesn't matter. The other thing I think I like leaders to do when they come in is to tell their journey, and also their journeys where they stumble. I think it's important for team members to see they're human. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. And I think a lot of leaders feel like, oh, I have to be perfect, especially when they start a new job. You come in and say the mistakes you've made in your life. I remember one time I got a new manager, and they actually told me they got fired for bad behavior from a prior company. I thought that was the best story ever, because I thought, okay, well, I didn't look at her differently. I just thought it was great because she was so open to us. And it's okay to celebrate failures, because, that's how you learn. So I think, when a new leader comes in, everybody's already afraid. They're afraid of changes, and they're afraid that their environment is going to shift.
Yeah.
And so you got to come in and build that trust.
Well, especially when you've got a team that's already experienced the leader who they weren't getting along with, or there's been conflict, and then probably at least one of the people on the team thinks, I could run this department better. And then now that other leader is out and a new one comes in and they're thinking to themselves, well, why wasn't it just me that was promoted? But now we've got this new person. And if that new leader does not prioritize, like you're saying, like if that leader's prioritizing the business tasks above the people, especially in an environment like that, where there's people that have already experienced conflict with the leader, they're going to be set up for failure in that team. They have to prioritize the people in their team first, I think, too.
Yep. There's the P's, right? The people come first. I always say, know the people and the playground, because you need to know what the culture is there that you're coming into. And you really should know that the people, the playground, okay, then the processes. I know that sounds crazy. And I think some leaders may look at me and go, you're crazy. We're here to lead people, to lead the team. But if you don't have the people, and you don't have the playground, you're not going to get the processes done. So, they should come first.
Yeah. And I just want to highlight too, because what you said, something you said really struck with me, that to highlight for anybody listening to this, for the humility aspect of leadership, which is often maybe not avoided, but not necessarily explicitly discussed when you're talking about leadership. And I immediately, when you said that, I immediately went to like the 2 or 3, when I think of the times I've had the most respect for a leader that I've served under, every single time was when they acknowledged themselves making a mistake and how they handled it. It was never because they were really good at, giving a presentation or giving a speech or running a meeting or helping me figure out a problem. It's always been, I realize I just reacted there, and that's not how I should have said that. Let me restart. It's always the humility that comes out that people are drawn to and people are respected. And that's like, now I can feel like it's okay for me to not be perfect too. And therefore I can take risks with sharing my voice. So that's huge aspect of what you're talking about.
Yeah, showing vulnerability is so key to humanizing yourself. I think that's important.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, Jeremy, if you think we have time for one more question, I have one more curiosity I want to ask Michelle, if before, I know we're running close on time. We've talked a lot about like the leadership level, the HR level, but we haven't really talked about like what employees can do when they're in an environment where there isn't necessarily, where they don't feel the safety to speak up. And I'm just kind of curious from your perspective and maybe your experience, in employee relations. Obviously, being connected to the resources is great, but not all organizations have resources, or not all organizations are communicating what the resources are, or the resources aren't effective because the culture is the way it is. And so I'm just kind of curious if you have any thoughts about any tips or advice for the individuals who are maybe stuck in an environment who don't necessarily have the amount of influence that maybe their leadership does, or the founders do, or HR has, in shifting that culture.
Yeah. It's such a good question, because that is something that I get asked a lot in my own personal life, because once, a lot of my friends know I'm in HR, or people in a network know I'm in HR, or they refer people to me just to ask me what to do because they have a problem in the workplace. Right. And, I kind of go through a lot of, I really try to get them to help self-reflect when I do speak with them. And, because I hear it all the time, for 20 something years, it's a hostile work environment or a toxic work environment, or I'm harassed. And, there's so much, those are such big statements. So it's really to get down to the root. But I do tell when people do come to me, I tell them they need to look at themselves first. I know we're talking about the environment, but I do tell them that no matter what, they need to create a positive, there's that word mindful again, right? So they need to create a positive, mindful space for themselves and protect them first and their inner self. Because when you're stuck in a cycle of stress and negativity, it's hard to do that. So they really need to have a clear mind versus a reactive one to really kind of sort through what do they need to do and what's the best decision. Otherwise, they're going to make a reactive decision. And then I kind of go through the steps with them. Okay, tell me what you've done. Who have you spoken to? What was their response? What exactly did you say? I do my little HR, my little intake. I put my intake hat on. But I do also tell them, to kind of get back to the basics, that it's, kind of within themselves, separate themselves from whatever the negativity is. If they can, they need to protect their own energy, avoiding, if there's toxic people in the workplace that they don't have to be around, don't be around them. Stay away from gossip in the workplace as well, to keep their conscience clear, so they really have the right mindset if they do need to escalate again, that they're not part of the problem, because they don't want to be part of the problem. A lot of times, if there is an environment that they just can't change, or that's just seems like it's crumbling them around them, they should be part of the solution versus the problem. And to solutionize, they need to get that inner peace a little bit. So really getting themselves back into a positive mindset. If something upsets them, don't react, don't go run and tell other people, kind of just keep it to themselves for a little while and process it, because your job is, you don't want to react and do something you can't take back. And, seek support from others, find themselves a mentor that is a positive person, that's within the organization, maybe a leader that is within a different department, and find themselves a mentor to help not complain to, but help get them set, help get them grounded again. And, really then if they can't get to a place and they cannot get the environment that they need to be in, I always remind them it's just a job. I hate to say that, but when it's my friends and people are coming to me, I'm like, we got to take you back to the basics. It's a job, and you got to self-protect yourself too. So, it's, and that's granted if they've already gone through the complaint process, they've already met with someone in HR, they've already, that everyone has done everything that they need to do. Sometimes employees just can't get beyond it. And maybe it is time for a change, because they may not be ready to accept it, and they need that fresh start. So that's when, it's a different conversation after they've tried everything. But I do like to tell folks to definitely self-ground themselves first and try to spin their thinking to a positive place if they can first, so that they're not reacting, because leaving a job is a big deal. And so is starting a new one. So, I don't want them to be reactive. I hope that helped, Luke. So that's just something that I do. That's
sometimes starting the new job isn't going to actually solve the problem, because you're just going to be stepping into another, environment that you don't know what's come up. So
I think sometimes people, they forget because it seems like such an endeavor to actually, get a new job, leave this job. And it's scary, sometimes very scary. They feel trapped, and they forget that they're actually making a choice. They're not trapped. They don't have to go to this job. They're making a choice. And so, there's some power that they are forgetting that they have. And a lot of times people get really, it feels very, they feel helpless and hopeless because they don't feel they have any power. But no, they have the power to make a choice to get up and go to that job. And that's a very powerful thing to have. So people have to be reminded of that sometimes, it seems like.
They do. And I think a lot of folks, we see it all the time in HR. I like to ask a team member, what would you like to see happen? I mean, I can't promise anything, right? But what would you like to see happen? So I can see where their mind is framed. Yeah. And you'll see a difference. And if someone could be in the same environment, they're like, I want that person fired. Well, it's probably not a possibility, because it depends on what we have going on here. But when someone finally reframes their mind to a positive space, most times you'll hear them say, well, I just really hope that they get some training and some development, and they just need to kind of shift the way that they're directing us. I feel micromanaged. So if they can stop that, they're able to really think through what is a more realistic solution, because they're not a shutdown.
Well, it's like, I would ask sometimes too, okay, let's just take for granted that you have the power to choose to be here. Okay, so you're choosing to be here. Now you have a few options now. Number one, option one is, are you going to stay because you believe something will change? And if so, what would that change be? What does that look like? Number two, are you going to stay and believe that nothing will change, but you believe that you can sort of change the way you think about it and it won't sit the same way? Or number three, are you going to stay, you don't believe anything will change, and you want to continue to be miserable? Which one are you going to choose? So that's your choice again, is to choose one of those options. So
that's the kind of the bottom line at the end right there.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I was just going to add on to that of something Jeremy and I talk a lot about with coaching folks in the situation of, if you want to stay, let's put a time on it. Like how long, if nothing changes, how long can you endure this? And let's just give it like 3 months, 6 months, a year. And let's just figure out everything you can do within your power to make it a workplace that you want to work at, but be committed towards that process. And once that timeline hits or it ends earlier, then let's look at maybe making sure you have alternatives. So you can retreat to safety somewhere else if you need to. But let's invest. Like if you don't be half in, half out, because then it's basically you're out is at that point, you're half in, half out. Well, we could talk about this for, a whole nother hour, I'm sure, but we are running, I think we're actually past our time just a little bit, but I really enjoyed this conversation. I always learn something new, and I appreciate you joining, Michelle, and contributing such great ideas and insights to our PLC community. Is there any other final words, Michelle, Jeremy, that either of you want to offer to folks signing into this?
Well, thanks, Jeremy. I think one of the biggest things is if you are a people leader out there and you have HR resources, definitely partner with them and utilize them. They're there for you, and share what your business objectives and goals are. Have them be a part of that, and really tap into them because they should be aligned. That's my biggest thing. And just really everything we talked about when it comes to being that empathetic leader and yourself as well. Take care of yourself. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to be that person that has to, I know a lot of people work a lot because when you are a manager, you're trying to get everything done. And I get that, but taking care of your own self is just as important so you can be there and take care of your people. So.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle. I'm looking forward to already going back and rewatching this conversation and picking up on some of the nuggets that kind of washed over me. But thank you so much. We hope to have you back maybe another time. And for everybody who's watching this, you can go to peacefulleadersclub.com if you're interested in learning more about what training opportunities we have for you. So with that, I think we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, guys.